This is the Marriage Podcast, and I'm your host, Alexandra Stockwell. I'm a physician turned relationship and intimacy expert, and I specialize in showing couples how to have incredible, passionate relationships. I myself have been married for 25 years. My husband and I have 4 children and full professional lives, and we've created an amazing relationship. If you want to deepen your understanding of your own relationship and learn to access new heights of emotional, sensual, and erotic intimacy, you're in the right place because I will show you how. Let's dive in. Hey everyone, this is Alexandra, and this is going to be a fun and intricate conversation, so put on your sophisticated listening skills. I am so happy to be speaking with Morgan Kandell and Rob Kandell. Morgan is passionate about functional medicine, becoming her limitless self, and changing the distorted reality in which we are creating ourselves from within. And let's just be clear, that should be in all of our bios, but it's the first time I've actually found it in someone's bio. So I really honor that, Morgan. And Rob, I think of your biography sort of like a topographical map with all kinds of hills and valleys and various landscapes in the corporate world, in personal growth, in sex and sensuality and coaching. You're a best-selling author of Unhidden, a book for men and those confused by them. And you've been featured all over the place. New York Times, Cosmopolitan, Huffington Post, etc. But the way that I really have been looking forward to introducing you is that I am often asked, how did I make the switch from being a physician to a relationship and intimacy coach? And in telling that story, I share that for my own purposes, I took a very in-depth sensuality and sexuality training, which was for lay people and people training to be coaches. But at the time, I didn't know what a coach was. That didn't interest me at all. I just was there for my own purposes. And I thought, well, I should know what's happening here. So I went to the teaching lab and I realized, oh, this is my home. This is actually what I want to do. But I still didn't know what coaching was. So I looked around and I hired what I considered the best coach based on my assessment at the time, which was one of my teachers, you, Rob Kandell. And so you coached me for 6 sessions and popped my cherry in terms of understanding the coach-client relationship, what coaching is all about, how one sets goals and is able to receive a kind of attention and facilitation, which results in transformation. And it's with you, Rob, that I really learned the difference between having a supportive conversation, a conversation with someone who's got some wisdom, and coaching, which includes all of those things, but really is so much more. So welcome to you both. Anything that you want to add to that introduction, Morgan?
No, thank you so much. It was lovely.
Okay. What about you, Rob?
I have just so many fond memories of those coaching sessions. And I think that like your eyes would kind of get really wide at certain times, if I remember correctly. I have this image of just like your eyes like getting filled up with viewpoints. And so I have very fond memories of those times.
Yeah, I think that's actually true because I have a lot of experience thinking about things from different points of view, but I didn't have experience having somebody else get in there with me. Obviously, I'm talking energetically and be close enough to what I was saying that when you brought new and different perspectives, it really touched me. I didn't need to translate and think, oh, how does this apply to me or anything like that. It was like you were just giving me other glasses to look at my situation, and you were informed enough about it for that to be a really profound experience. So I love that reflection. I was unaware of my eyes doing that, but that's really beautiful. So actually, before we go into the main question I wanted to ask the two of you, would one or both of you just describe the evolution of your relationship and how long you've been together so that that's understood as we have the rest of our conversation?
I'm going to handle that one, love.
Yeah, go ahead.
Well, the first most important thing is I'm calling from North Carolina and Morgan is in Los Angeles. And it's part of the evolution of our relationship, the trust to being in 2 different states due to current life circumstances. And so it's really just in pride that I can feel as more connected now from across the country in our long distance relationship, if you call that, based on those circumstances. And the way I describe the evolution of our relationship is she came to me for business coaching through a mutual friend and for a 2-hour session. And during that session, I noticed there was some flirtatious mannerisms that I was picking up. And as a business coach, I was having none of it, really just holding the container. And but it was like, wow, it's super attractive. And it was hard to hold that container, but still it was important. And then after those 2 hours, basically fired her as a client and started dating after that. And really, I remember getting a text after our first time together, and she called me dear. And it was such this familiar, beautiful moment of familiarity and connection that I just thought I'd known this person for many lifetimes already. So that was the first moment. And I'll stop there and see if you want to add any information to that beginning.
Yeah, I felt that familiarity as well. I felt like before I even met you face to face, when we were talking on the phone, I felt like I knew you already.
Yeah.
Maybe many lifetimes, who knows?
Yes. So we started dating, and I would say for myself, I came from a wounded place in the beginning of the relationship. I was 45 at that point, and I was recovering from PTSD from my previous lifestyle. And I was really in relationship angry at the feminine for my acquiescence to the feminine. So I think that's really important to say that with responsibility. I wasn't angry for what the feminine did to me, though they were not innocent of anything. But I was more angry at my acquiescence to it, that I surpassed my own boundaries. I said yes where I meant no for 12 years. And really...
Wait, just 1 second, Rob, because I think there are people listening who think, oh, here's this guy. He's super interesting. He's very clear. But what does he mean by acquiescing to the feminine? Will you say that so that well-educated people who are listening but unfamiliar with what you mean can understand what you're saying? Because I think it's super important, even if someone hasn't walked your path.
Sure. Well, there's the pristine version of it is called surrender. And the way I like to describe it is when you surrender to the ocean, you surf. So you get in the water and the waves are going and you're not fighting and you turn your body at the right time. You're on a surfboard or body surfing, and the ocean will just take you on the ride of your life. It's just, you're in relationship, you're surrendered. You're not fighting the ocean. You're actually, working it. The other option, the other end of the spectrum, is to fight it and try to beat the ocean up. Like, no, you can't do that to me. No, I will not, you're not controlling me. No, no, no. And then right in the middle, and probably even more dangerous point, is this thing called acquiescence, where you're like, okay, fine, I'll do it. It's the very common in men, especially modern men. No More Mr. Nice Guy talks about this a lot, about how men will say yes where they mean no, all the while suppressing all the anger at saying no. And so acquiescence is sort of like, fine, okay, you win. It's just that sort of thing. And so I was acquiescent in 12 years of this relationship to this system.
Well, I love so much what you've just said because it really expands the conversation. But I actually meant to ask you to clarify what you mean by the feminine.
I see. So the feminine depends on your version of it. There's the masculine side, which is really grounded and solid and to-do lists and crossing I's and crossing T's and dotting I's and structure and movement. And then there's this mystical, beautiful, powerful feminine that doesn't like to-do lists, that doesn't like to be structured, that likes to create experiences and messes and mayhem. And the feminine, to me, is the marriage of the masculine and feminine is where the power is. And so I was very good in the masculine. And before the system, I was very masculine. And so was learning to be in relationship to the feminine, this power source, not women, but the feminine. And there's a lot of mistakes I made in learning to be in relationship to it.
Okay. But if someone's listening and they don't have the reference points that you do, would it be fair to say that you acquiesce to controlling women? Could someone listen and hear what you're saying with that as an understanding?
Controlling women is probably the face of it, the marketing, the front. Every person has a mix of masculine and feminine. There are some men that are more feminine than most women I know. There are some women that are more masculine. So I don't like to mix the feminine with gender identification. And if you want to take a shortcut, yeah, there were some badass women that controlled me for a long time. And I was mad for saying yes where I meant no.
Okay, awesome. Continue with the story, and thank you for that detour.
I don't know, Morgan, if you have thoughts about that beginning of that first step.
Well, I totally agree with you that obviously there's feminine and masculine in all of us. And I think that just to take it back to even our relationship is that I really saw for myself that I was running more in the masculine than in the feminine. And you talking about acquiescing to the feminine, I think that you had your own experiences with your mother. And so we're just so informed from our early childhood experiences that we then take into all of our relationship dynamics.
Beautiful.
Yeah. So, I came wounded. I met Morgan. I knew this was the person, even though in the first month, even though I wasn't even looking for the person, she was the person. And we started this journey together. There was a lot of layers. There was a lot of experiences. There was a lot of viewpoints that I believed was necessary in relationship, non-monogamy being one big piece, freedom being another piece. And I was stoically determined to hold on to these rights and not be overrun by the feminine, again, by women and controlled, and came off, with a lot of mistakes and a lot of miscommunications and a lot of not paying attention. And, through this 6.5-year journey we've been on, just learning that I don't have to hold my boundaries through force. I don't have to hold my boundaries through destruction or no. There was always a yes and. And so to make a very long story short, the journey has really been one of finding a deeper relationship with this other person from the point of yes and, which I had to learn how to communicate. I had to learn to listen. I had to learn to validate. I had to learn to just become a better man to be in relationship with this incredible woman.
It's beautiful to hear that. And actually, usually towards the end of each interview, but this seems like a good moment to ask. I ask all of my guests because I really believe that relationship is the ultimate vehicle for personal growth. So, Morgan, what have you learned about yourself as a result of being in relationship with Rob?
It's so funny because Rob and I were talking yesterday, and we were both saying that we are completely different humans today than we were when we met each other. And I actually think that's true, like even almost on a daily basis, because it's this constant flow of the in-breath and the out-breath, or the blossoming of the flower, where we're kind of constantly deepening into ourselves from the reflection that we receive from each other. So I can give you more tangible things, but I'll just say on the whole, I feel like we're both completely different humans, better versions of ourselves, looking more deeply into any traumas or wounds or childhood issues, looking into how we can always do it better, saying, I'm sorry, and what can I do? How can I do it better next time? And I think that just from that growth, I'm a better parent. I'm a better human in society. I'm a better practitioner for clients that I work with. I'm better in all ways and better sister, and I just feel, I totally agree with you that relationships are where we do our deep work.
Thank you. Beautiful. So Rob, in a way, you've been sharing your answer, but I'm just going to ask anyway. What have you learned about yourself as a result of being in relationship with Morgan?
I've just learned to listen more. I mean, that's really what it comes down to. I believe communication is the key, the foundation of all, from work to sex to relationship. Communications, my lineage says that sex is a subset of communication. It's a form of communication. And so, Morgan really taught me, first and foremost, to slow down, to increase the space between stimuli and response, to not necessarily respond from those childhood wounds or from this fervent belief that I know what's right for myself or the situation, just to take that moment to analyze. And in terms of communication, the most important thing she taught me, which has impacted me across the board, is just the concept of validation. Because the masculine side of me just wants to fix it, to move from point A to point B as efficiently as possible. Tell me the problem, I'll move the box from point A to point B. Done. And what Morgan's really taught me is the feminine form of communication is desire to be in relationship. It cares less about moving the box from point A to point B, but more about how do you feel moving the box from point A to point B, which infuriates the masculine. But if I move the box from point A to point B without considering her feelings, without slowing down enough to say, oh, let me sit in your shoes, even for a moment. Let me get into your world. Let me understand how you see this moment in time. And what that's taught me is first to slow down, to see, to validate, not to agree with necessarily, but like, wow, I can really get how you feel that way. I can really, and authentically, because at the beginning it kind of came off robotically, but now it's sort of like, wow, okay, hold on, I got to get that. And so that's taught me to be in deeper relationship. And then together in that relationship, it's so much more pleasurable moving the box from point A to point B.
I just love that description.
I was just going to add to that it was just for relationships out there in the beginning when I said, can we slow down? And we started doing this practice of, really validating. Can I curse? Is this okay?
Yes,
okay.
You may. This is labeled explicit in the podcast categories.
Okay. So Rob would, say, oh, I understand how you feel. And I would be like, he's fucking lying. He has no idea how I feel. He's not even taking 1 second to really, like what he said, put himself in my shoes. And it really felt like he was faking it. And just kind of, I gave him this script and he's saying the script and saying all the things he should say, but I didn't really feel like he felt it. And I will say that he kept up with it. And years later, it is the most amazing experience to have your partner really see you and really validate you and really be able to experience what you're experiencing with you, not to placate or make you small or play the victim with you, but just to let you know that, yes, you are seen, you are heard, and I'm by your side.
I love how you both describe that, because I'm often, when I'm coaching couples, suggesting that he or she, depending on what we're working on, and if it's a heteronormative couple, say something, because that's the thing that's going to work. And typically the very first response is, that feels canned, it feels forced, it doesn't feel authentic. And I just think it is so important to practice something, not because it's inauthentic, but because it's headed in the right direction. And the only way to get there is to practice enough until it feels completely true. And I really love the way each of you have described that. And it actually takes into one of the questions that I've been really looking forward to talking with both of you about, which is the dilemma of being a clinician, a coach, a doctor, nurse, any professional who's putting attention on individual clients and facilitating their growth. It is one of the most important human skills, and our world needs a lot of that. And all three of us are very qualified to do that. But there's a very intricate dilemma that occurs when we take our clinical know-how, our coaching skills, and apply them to our spouse, even when our spouse really does need to grow in those ways. And so the two of you have talked about how, like Morgan, you guided Rob to pause before responding and to validate. And yet there's nothing in the flavor of how either one of you are saying that has it feel like, Rob, you became Morgan's client. And the fact that that isn't true is the result of how artful and intentional the two of you are. Because once we become skillful at seeing how other people need to change, we already see how our partners need to change, but once we know how to do something about it, it's very easy to put our partner in that position, which inherently creates more of a parent-child dynamic and just is like a sinkhole for erotic energy. So will the two of you describe, is that anything that you ever navigated consciously, or did this just work itself out in an artful way?
Want to go first?
Yeah, sure. So when I think back to our relationship dynamic, I think that the way that we set it up is that we always want to keep learning together. And because we have that foundation of that we always want to be a better version of ourselves, that there's an overt agreement between us that when we see an area that either one of us can do it better, we, ask permission. I'm seeing this thing, and we do it in a responsible way. I really like Alison Armstrong's work. I hope that maybe some of your audience might be familiar with her, but
yes, for sure.
She talks a lot about women castrating men. And so I think I'll just speak for myself that when I talk to Rob, I try to come from the perspective of he really might not be that interested in this, and let me ask permission. And then there are some areas where nutrition and health, where he says to me, just tell me what to do. I don't care. I don't want to know anything more. I don't need to know the reason behind it. Just tell me what to do, set up my supplements, and it's good. So we have that overt commitment to each other. And then I think from that is where we can navigate. But I think without some kind of an agreement around it, I think it would be very dicey.
I completely agree about asking permission first. Have you had the experience, Morgan, where you said, I see something and I want to share it with you. Are you interested to hear it? And Rob said, no, I'm not.
He's never said, no, I'm not, period. It might be not right now. Can we talk about it tonight? Or, something like that. But never have I ever heard him say no, period.
That's so interesting to me, because in the evolution of doing this with my husband, I've been married 25 years. We have 4 children, and I'm intense. And it was a really important part of our evolution, my husband's evolution, and for me, definitely my evolution, for him to sometimes say no. It brought a lot of freedom and trust and helped me really decouple my sense of responsibility for his growth. But I think it speaks to the mastery that you came to your relationship with, that you've never needed to say no as something in your relationship. It wasn't, your power and your individuality in other ways. What would you say in response to this question about treating one another, not treating one another as clients, but still bringing the wisdom that you have in your expertise?
I think we've had many experiences where I haven't done it pristinely. The voice would come, just this kind of cold, direct, tough love voice that I use in my work that wasn't the right time or the right place. And I think in retrospect, when I thought about it, it's when I was more attached to my agenda of what I want the result to be rather than connected to Morgan as a person, which I think is just part of the human condition. I was more invested in her seeing this thing by the methodology that I thought was the best and most efficient, rather than taking in what she would want. And I think that's where the biggest miscues came from. When I would just get into that voice and I would get frustrated, I would not be resourced. And I think that's, that's happened. It hasn't happened in a while because I think, one, I saw the impact of it. The impact was not efficient. It wasn't getting me what I wanted. It wasn't getting what she wanted. It was just a habit that needed to be modified if I wanted to get closer to my highest goal, which was to be in connection with her. And so really, I let go of that pedantic direction of seeing my viewpoint now into how do we see this viewpoint together? And so consent really became one of the most important things. I think consent in communication is surely underused and needs to be done more and more. I have this thing that I see. Do you want to hear it? It happens all the time now. And like she was going on a rant about 2 weeks ago about a thing. And I could just see something that she wasn't seeing. And I listened, I validated. And the next thing was a consent. I see this thing. Do you want to hear it? And usually when I say that question, the answer is a yes. And then not to invalidate what you said, I said, well, there's this part that's happening and I can see. And is that serving your highest goals? And then it becomes a collaborative communication. When I was in my agenda-based relating, it was more antagonistic in terms of, I want her to see this thing. And so moving from that antagonistic communication into a collaborative, that's where the deepest intimacy has arisen from.
I love what you're pointing to because, consent leads to collaboration and curiosity leads to collaboration. It's not a word you've used, but it's kind of sprinkled in with everything you're saying. And I wonder if we can zoom in, Rob, can you say more, or just, even if you just said it again, it's something that is very hard for many people to understand, the pivot from being focused on your outcome to focused on feeling the connection with any particular communication. And you described that, but will you zoom in and what does it take to make that pivot? What's the dialogue you're having inside yourself?
Well, first and foremost, I think most people live in codependent thought processes and viewpoints. They believe that without the other, they're not 100%. They need the other. Let it be a partner, religion, God, whatever it is. They're not whole. And my viewpoint is that we are 100% whole without. And then in relationship is an opportunity. It's the extra. It's the ice cream to the fine apple pie. It's wonderful, but it's not required. And so my biggest transition in my life was moving from codependent to interdependent, from, building my own self-esteem, being built upon esteemable acts, where I was 100% whole without the approval of Morgan, without the need for Morgan. And so when I come from that place, I have so much more abundance rather than most people live in, the form of their scarcity. Oh, she'll get mad at me, or she'll withhold sex, or she'll give me that dirty look, and that means I'm not a good man. And all these, very society laden viewpoints that keep men and women and all genders really hooked on the approval of others. And so once I learned to self-approve, and the foundation of my life is self-generation, then it gives me so much more space, to be honest, to take my time, to not have to have her on my agenda. And that was the biggest transition I felt in the last 15 years.
Wow. I love how you've expressed it. So grateful, Rob. Morgan, is there some parallel experience that you've had while experiencing this transition in Rob, or maybe you've made it yourself?
Absolutely. Yeah. I think along the lines of what Rob's talking about, I would call it maybe self-compassion. And to be more specific, there was last summer, when we were all in this big experience that the world is going through right now. And we had very differing opinions around it. And I had the same experience that Rob was talking about, where I really felt strongly that I wanted him to see the viewpoints that I had, and trying really hard to kind of almost shove it down his throat, because I thought it was the best. And I thought it was important for him to see my viewpoints and to agree with me. And we went through a really rough time where we went really, on this roller coaster ride with our relationship, where we were not even sure what was going to end up happening. And I think that we used it such an incredible learning experience, where we both were able to grow from it and not have that attachment that he was talking about to if the other person believed in the same things that we believed in or not. And it really did teach me a new level of what Rob's talking about, which is self-compassion, and kind of knowing that if the relationship, if he sees what I see or doesn't see, I'm okay. I'm still strong in myself. I can believe and feel strong in whatever I believe and feel strong in. And I don't need him to always see and be on the same page as that with me, as long as we can continue to foster that we both are growing. That is the cornerstone or the keystone to our relationship, is that we're both still growing. If we stop growing, we know, okay, we might be done. And so I think from there is really like how we navigate everything.
I think it's honestly the only truly sustainable foundation for a relationship. I mean, putting aside, well, we've always lived in this village, so we're going to stay here, or stay together because of the kids, or stay together for financial reasons. In terms of something that really fuels passion, the only truly sustainable foundation is a mutual commitment to one another and one's own growth. And it's really delightful to hear the fairly gentle way that each of you express this massive conviction. Is there any projects you have going on, Morgan? I know you said you're not working with clients currently, but any way you'd like people to follow you if they're interested to do so as a result of this conversation?
At the moment, no. And I'm mostly just focusing on my family at this time.
Okay. Yeah. Well, that's beautiful. Anyone inspired by you can do the same thing with a little bit of extra oomph.
Yeah.
Rob, what about you?
Yeah, I've been in this transition. I left my last lifestyle and wanted to become this thought leader. So I did all the things, the Facebook and the Instagram, and wrote a book that I'm actually quite proud of. It's called Unhidden, a book for men and those confused by them. And really in the last 18 months, I've transitioned more into fractional CFO work, helping small businesses up level. And so my fractional CFO work is the focus at the moment. But if there's coaching or questions, I just recommend getting the book. It's a good read for all genders to understand what's happening for men and how to better relate to them. And you can always contact me if you have questions. I have 250 episodes of a podcast called Tough Love, which is still up there in an archive with many, many different topics all over the place. So TUFF Love. And I do take on very select few VIP clients, couples and singles. So you can contact me, Robert at robertkandell.com is the address. So that's the scoop.
Okay, wonderful. That'll be in the show notes along with the link to Unhidden. Well, thank you both very, very much for speaking from your hearts in such a precise and generous way. I'm really grateful for the conversation.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Pleasure.
Thank you for joining me for this episode of the Marriage Podcast. Please rate and review the show on iTunes. It really makes a difference. And if you have a question or a comment, reach out to me via my website at alexandrastockwell.com.